Welcome to Sibos Today. I'm Nadine DeReza.
And I'm Stephen Chia. And what a fantastic start we've had to Sibos 2017 right here in Toronto. So far, any standout moments for you, Nadine?
Absolutely. I love talking to the delegates earlier, getting a sense of what they were looking forward to. I mean, some of the sessions that they've got coming up on cybersecurity was of great interest to people, and artificial intelligence as well, and quantum computing.
And there's more to come.
Yep, indeed. So our day is certainly far from over, is it, Stephen? We've got plenty more to do. And later on, we're going to be talking to Lisa Lansdowne-Higgins about Canada's 150th anniversary and also the latest developments to the payment systems.
But first, providing cybersecurity to financial organizations and their customers requires constant innovation as well as vigilance. Cyber criminals don't stand still. They're constantly looking for new weaknesses to exploit and developing new tools to make their attacks.
And that's why SWIFT launched a major innovation of its own in April, the Customer Security Controls Framework. It creates a cybersecurity baseline which reinforces security standards across the global industry.
Well, earlier we spoke to Jean-Francois Legault, Global Head Cybersecurity Operations at JP Morgan, and also Steve Gilderdale, Global Lead for SWIFT's Customer Security Program, and began by asking them to update us on that evolving cyber threat.
Well, I think if we look back to this time last year in Geneva, we were talking about the customer security program having just been in place for around 5 months. But since then, an awful lot has happened. And I think it's fair to say that cyber threats have increased in both sophistication and scale. And really, cyber is, if it wasn't before, firmly now a top-of-the-house issue for banks. And it's really a threat landscape which is indiscriminate on industry type, on sector, and this really means that everybody has to put a concerted effort into addressing the risk.
Yeah, and when you look at the threat, right, we used to break down threats of fraud and cybersecurity. What we're seeing now is really a blended threat where adversaries will try and monetize whatever they can. If they get into a financial institution, if they get into a large corporate, they'll try and get as much as they can out of that organization. And criminals have actually built out a supply chain where some of them focus on developing malware, others focus on the actual work within the organizations, others are very much focused on the cash out, so on the money mule aspect. So we're seeing criminals get a little bit more refined in the way they operate, and they're actually very much focused on making as much money as they can.
And Stephen, what has the SWIFT team been doing about all of this?
Well, there's an awful lot that has happened over the last 12 months, and really the customer security program is oriented around 3 pillars. So we've done a lot around securing and protecting the infrastructure of our users, and there we've launched new software updates which have introduced 2-factor authentication or more advanced tampering detection mechanisms. We've also been focusing on prevention and detection, and there, for example, December last year, we launched a set of reports called daily validation reports, which enabled our users to look at the information that they have locally and check that against a second source of information, these reports. But the third part is really around community and about sharing information together. And this has been a particular focus for us, and we launched a portal called the SWIFT ISAC portal a few months back. And this is a place that all of our users can go to find the latest information about threats, indicators of compromise, modus operandi. And these 3 things together are really the package of things that we've been focusing on over the last 12 months.
Well, Jeff, if I can ask you about JP Morgan then, how are you guys tackling this issue?
Well, when you look at cyber risk, it's really about partnerships. It's partnerships within an organization, and it's partnerships across the industry, right? So it's become more and more important for payment professionals to work very closely with cyber professionals to address the risk. It's important that cyber professionals work with the business to inform them of the threats and the intelligence that we're collecting to help shape the products. It's also about partnership across the industry. If you look at the SWIFT ISAC, you look at the FS-ISAC, the FSARC, there are a number of bodies that exist that are there to allow the sharing of information between financial institutions, and it's important that financial institutions bring that back within their organization and engage with the payment professionals in the organization, with the business, right? It's really important that we get to a point where there's really no border between the two. It's really a collaboration. It's important that we look at organizational design as well to ensure that these groups are collaborating on the threat.
So what then is your view on the SWIFT customer security controls framework?
Well, we got involved through the community feedback process very early on, and it was important to us to be able to work with SWIFT on providing feedback like many other financial institutions did. When you look at cyber controls, they're not cookie cutter. There's no one size fits all, and there was a lot of value in us working with SWIFT to ensure that this met the needs of all of the members, so that we could have a lot more transparency around cyber risk. The other aspect is customer security frameworks are actually driving a lot more transparency across the industry, and they're also forcing conversations. I mentioned that it's important for cybersecurity professionals to work with payment professionals. When you look at these frameworks, they're forcing that conversation as well.
And on that note, do you see it increasing security transparency in the financial community? You've alluded to that.
It is, because cyber risk is what we could call emerging versus more things like AML, sanctions, KYC. But we're bringing all that together now to make risk-informed business decisions on counterparties. So bringing all that information together on risk, on threat, and on the controls is ensuring that there's more transparency across the sector.
And I have to say that's great to hear, because what we really try to set out to do with the customer securities control framework is set a level of security that every SWIFT user must meet, and then an ability through the attestation for them to show that they have met that level of security. The intention was always to have that information available and to counterparties so that they could incorporate that into their current counterparty risk assessment processes and extend those processes, therefore, from the traditional credit risk or AML, KYC kind of evaluations into operational risk, and specifically cyber. So that was really something which cut across the three pillars I was mentioning earlier in terms of protecting infrastructure, understanding counterparty risk in detecting and responding part, and also sharing information.
Is that an area that SWIFT will be focusing on here at Sibos?
Absolutely. We've got a few things that we're focusing on at Sibos. One of them is indeed the attestation process and helping each of our users understand how they can go through the process and successfully get to attest against the security controls. And in some cases, that may mean a project to really increase the level of security within their infrastructure. But we've got a couple of other things as well, where we have a focus on the SWIFT ISAP portal that we were mentioning earlier, and we have a focus on payment control mechanisms and our payment control service. So we have auditorium sessions on all three, and we have demos at the SWIFT Lab. So you can really get a hands-on experience of how do I use the KYC security attestation portal, how can I use the ISAP portal, what kind of information is in there, or a live demo actually of the payment control service and how that might help control payment flows as a sender. So together with the big issue debate around cyber and digitalization, and some of the SWIFT Institute sessions we have, and one particularly interesting to me is around quantum encryption and how that might change the landscape going forward. I think we've got a great agenda at Sibos this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about quantum computing as well. That's going to be a fascinating area. I think many of the delegates are going to share that view with you. So what new developments are coming down the line in terms of the customer security program?
Well, I've mentioned a couple, and I think one of the biggest ones that we have on the horizon is the payment control service. So this will be going into pilot early 2018, and it's the ability for a SWIFT customer to set criteria around the kind of payments that they expect to be sending to their counterparties. And this really can be used as a mechanism to say, well, actually, I want to limit the impact if there was a potential fraud that taken place, I would know that I would not be able to send a payment over a certain value or to a certain destination, or I'll have a blacklist set of beneficiaries, for example, which I know I will not be able to send to. So that we're really excited to see. We're also going to extend the ISAC portal functionality. So today, each of our users can get access to this intelligence, and we're going to be extending it so that they can download that information in an automated way through automated feeds. And we're also going to be opening that up to the vendor community, so router vendors, antivirus vendors, etc. So they can take that information and incorporate very quickly into their engines that will detect potential malware.
Mm-hmm. Well, JF, cyber threats are here to stay. How do you see them, or further challenges that might evolve in the future?
Further challenges, that's interesting, right? We've seen, like I mentioned, the cyber threat and the fraud threat come together. We can expect more of that. We've seen some disruptive attacks over the last 6 months that have led to business disruption in large-scale organizations. And all of that, when you look at good security hygiene, good control frameworks, there's an ability to reduce that risk, right? And it's important that we understand where adversaries are going, the threats that are upcoming, as you mentioned, so that we can actually feed that back into a cyber risk management program to ensure that we're addressing the right things, we're addressing the right controls and the right threats, and things that will bring us the most risk reduction.
And JF, further on, is there an opportunity for those in the payments business for value add when it comes to strong cyber security credentials?
Totally. When I look at ideal candidates for roles, it's always about finding people that can talk business and can talk cyber. They are oftentimes unicorns, but when you can actually find those people, they bring so much to the organization. If you go back to what I was saying about collaboration between business and cyber, when you have somebody that can talk about both, you're actually increasing the value of the intelligence because it's contextualized, it's actionable, and that person really becomes part of the business.
And I think this is absolutely essential. We've seen certainly over the last 12 to 18 months where we've been reaching out to customers and working with them on customer security. You see a variety of different capabilities in terms of cyber capability, and there can be a traditional kind of IT security approach to cyber, and you can go all the way through to the unicorn that JF was talking about. And when you get the unicorn, you really get the best capability, understanding the risks to the business, understanding how payments work, and coupling that with an understanding of technology. That's really important. So,
is that something that is perhaps in transition as we talk about generations changing? The younger ones are growing up in a world that is vastly different. Their understanding of these threats will be much clearer than previous generations. Is this something that you will continue to work with the community? Is that where we need to really, the forefront, and that's where it needs to work to get it developed correctly?
Well, I think there is work to do in terms of awareness, that is for sure. And we've been concentrating on that considerably over the last 12 months with a campaign we've run around work sessions where we've had over 14,500 people attend a session where they can learn about the cyber threat and understand it more. I think in terms of generational, I think there will be more of a normal level of living with risk around that is related to cyber. I think it's still going to require deep expertise. I think it's still going to require people who understand the business risks and can match that with the technical expertise to be able to understand how that risk is potentially going to materialize.
So constant innovation and vigilance go hand in hand.
They do. When you look at new generations of software, we're seeing more of cybersecurity professionals being focused on enabling and not saying no, and that's so important. Traditionally, there was a lot of, you can't do that, you can't do this, and now it's more about how do we help you achieve that? And that way you're sure that you're building controls into the environment, that the products that are being rolled out have stronger cyber controls.
And that was an update on the customer security controls framework. Now it's time for one of our films from Tourism Toronto that we'll be sharing with you over the coming days. And they give an insider's view of this beautiful city and its people. First up, Chloe Wild, who's entertainment reporter for local TV show eTalk.
Take a look.
You're breaking my stride. Wild, and I'm a reporter at eTalk.
We go. One day at a time. If I don't act now, but I'm losing my mind, and you've got me.
This industry keeps me in the public eye a lot, doing interviews, being at parties or dinners. So when I don't have to do those things, I love to just be in my cozy clothes, grab a cup of coffee, explore the city by foot is one of my favorite activities.
And I want you now.
When I go to Trinity Bellwoods, I feel really zen and just kind of appreciative of where I am and where I want to get going.
There is some kind of light in those eyes, and you've got me.
I will say this out loud, and I am not ashamed. I am fully addicted to caffeine. Coffee shops are my go-to spot when I just need a little pick-me-up or I just want to go check out a new place.
Is this all I can say? Every time I get close and I feel your fade, but you've got me.
The Ossington Strip is really interesting because every single time that I walk along it, I find something new. It's always changing, so it's a great place to explore.
And I want you now.
It's also a really trendy street. It's a great place to get inspiration for outfits or lifestyle because everybody always looks really on trend on Ossington.
And I want you now. And I want you now.
I love going to a farmer's market. I love meeting the vendors and hearing about what their stories are, and I find that really, really special. One of my favorite things to do is unwind with some of my closest girlfriends. The amazing community of women in this city, they're all hustlers and go-getters and dreamers, and it's really cool to be a part of that. Toronto is an amazing city, and I'm so proud to live here and call it my home.
And that was Chloe Wild, and we'll be showing some more films over the coming days as well,
true.
hopefully to give you some inspiration. And at Sibos, we're so glad to call Toronto our home, even if it's just for a few brief days. But hopefully with all our video guides, you can grab a little time to get out there and enjoy some of this amazing city.
Well, I did have a sneak peek. I went for a run yesterday evening down by the harbour, and that was just amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I caught the sunset, and it was really nice. So I think if you have the chance, make sure you walk out of the convention centre for at least a little bit to enjoy the city. Well, it's great to see that we not only have some familiar faces from last year, but also strong representation from Canada's financial institutions, many of which are headquartered not far from here in the financial district.
So I'm delighted to welcome back to Sibos TV Vice President, Business Deposits and Treasury Solutions for Royal Bank of Canada and SWIFT board member Lisa Lansdowne-Higgins. Lisa, great to see you here, and born and bred in Toronto.
Born and bred in Toronto. Yes.
We were talking about this last year at Sibos, saying how we were coming to Toronto, and you were excited to have us here.
Yeah.
We're here now,
Yeah.
and
I'm thrilled. Nothing better than have Sibos in your own backyard.
Yeah.
It's so funny because it's the season for Toronto. You know, we kicked off the season with TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. We hosted the world there. We rolled right into the Invictus Games, which brought global athletes around the world, and now we have the global financial community. What can be better?
there you go.
And how about looking forward to the week ahead? What exactly are you looking forward to?
Well, you know, when you look at the week ahead, it is so full of rich conversation, and the buzz certainly continues to be around all the key things. If we reflect back to Geneva and we take a look at Geneva, we kicked off with cyber, and cybercrime still is front and center for us. I think that's table stakes when you think about it from a financial industry perspective, when you look at safety, soundness, security, resiliency. So as you look at the week ahead, all those table stakes are there, but they're richer. You know, we've launched the customer security program. We have all the banks ready to attest by the end of December. So being able to follow through on all of that. But the buzz, everything that we're talking about in all the pre-workshops continues to be innovation.
And your CEO, David Mackay, obviously was in the opening speech, the opening plenary, which was packed.
Yes.
What were your key thoughts about the speech? What did you take away from it?
Oh, love the speech. Listen, when you think about his messages, he talked about innovation, he talked about disruption, data, partnerships, and when you start to think about all those things and you think about all the work streams here at Sibos, it really resonates. It means that from a global community perspective, we've got the right dialogue and that we're bringing it forward. I still laugh, he kicked us off with 2007, which was the financial crisis, but the key message that was under there, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone. And you fast forward a decade, and that has transformed what we do every day, how we look at insights, how we go about our day-to-day lives. He talked about the fact in 2007, he talked about cloud computing.
Yep.
And cloud computing, you even look at Swift, we actually now have products and services available on the cloud. And when you think about all of those being real in 10 years later, and I come back to then, what does he look forward to? And those messages around blockchain, data, quantum computing, and how that's going to really shape what the future is, and looking at client insights and really developing it from him. In my view, he really set the vision for the future, right? Something we can see, something that you can really believe in. When I think about all of those messages, and he talked about breaking down barriers, partnerships, going across industries, that's what Sibos is all about. When I think about Sibos, that's about bringing that community together. It's what we do best.
That kind of collaboration and partnership, which I guess decades ago might not have even been a thought in your head at all,
Well, I think reach globally was always the challenge, right? How were you going to do that?
But fintech and innovation, we mentioned, are themes that have carried on over the years, and again here is at the forefront. How have developments been in that area, do you think, in the past 12 months?
Oh, well, you just take Swift, for example, right? So the developments in the last 12 months have been substantial. We're going to kick it off because the global payment innovation, without question, being able to bring that from concept 2 years ago at a Sibos. Royal Bank was a partner right from the beginning. We were part of the pilot, we were part of the initial launch and how we were going to collaborate with the GTB banks. And now it's here. We launched it this year. 22 banks are live. I can't remember the number of payments Godfrey said, but it was well over 100,000 payments have gone through that. And when you think about it, the other statistic that's really been interesting on the global payment innovation is a number of transactions are settling within a half an hour, something about 33%. So when you see that in the last 12 months, what we've been able to do as a community, modernizing correspondent banking, this is the start of it. And for me, I think that speaks volumes. But that isn't the only thing. Real-time payments in Australia. It's going to go live next month. And that was a really big investment for Swift to come into real-time payments. And then you look at financial crime and compliance. They talked about the Isaac platform that is a collaboration allowing us to share cyber events. And I think that really spoke volumes to, again, bringing the community together on an important topic. We talked about the launch of the name screening service. We have the service around payment controls that helps the community to monitor and manage their payment flows come through. It's been a really busy 12 months, but a lot has been achieved.
Absolutely. And when I interviewed a couple of people earlier on Talking Sibos, they talked about Canada's modernisation.
Yes.
And I'd love to get your take on it, because it is underway. What are sort of some of the key changes that are taking place?
Oh, listen, I think modernization for us really is about invigorating the community again. And I really think that for us, it's going to be the platform that allows us to embrace change, allows us to innovate and give us the headspace to say that we're going to be creative. For us, RBC has really been committed to the program right from the very beginning. Payments Canada has collaborated with the community. They continue to do. They keep the roadmap fresh, and it really is something that helps us to set a platform for the future. But in 2018, where are we going to start? Well, we're going to start with our low-value AFT or ACH batch systems. We're going to add a third exchange window, which will happen by 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's really significant for the western part of our country. We have a really big footprint from a geographic perspective, and our corporates can now better settle end of day. The funds availability to customers will be within 2 hours. And then we will also make sure that we're qualified for indirect clears. We'll make sure files get to them as well.
Now, you just mentioned the roadmap. Anything else that's next on the roadmap?
Well, the next, all the big things. In fact, when you look at payments modernization, modernization, it really is looking at 3 different rails. Our high value, our large value settlement system is going to be modernized as well, and we're going to look at real-time payment platforms.
What do you think other countries can learn from Canada's experience?
Well, first, I have to thank the other countries. You know, globally, what we've done, the moment we knew modernization was at the forefront, is we reached out. And they have been very forthcoming in sharing best practices. And it really helps us to accelerate where it is we want to put our priorities. And I think that really makes a huge difference. But what did we learn? You know, it's really interesting. And the one thing that really stood out for us was the fact that we actually had a near real-time system with Interac. And it's very unique to the Canadian space. It was something that we collaborated on decades ago. Canadians had a huge adoption around what we call near real-time payments. And so to find out that we actually already had a platform that we could jump off from really made a big difference. And it helped us shape what that roadmap will be with Payments Canada.
And Canada, of course, celebrating its 150th birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Canada. So how is Sibos celebrating this?
Well, it's funny. I was coming down the escalators into the exhibit floor, and if you walk by the Canadian Lounge, you can see all the symbols for 150 years. What we have, if you take a look all around on the material, the media, it continues to underpin. But more importantly, on the closing ceremonies, I believe that there'll be cake cutting to celebrate, and we're inviting everybody to celebrate with us.
Hurrah, cake.
There'll be a lot of cake.
Yes, I'm thinking there will.
But you know what, you were saying Toronto is your home. You grew up here.
I
mean,
did.
give us a bit of a sneak peek. Many of
Sure.
us are visiting.
Yeah.
Where are some of the places that you say are must go?
Oh my gosh, well, there's so much.
Yeah.
Let's start with the fact that if you're looking for a small pockets of community with food, Chinatown's just west of us. Go a little bit north of Chinatown, you'll find Little Italy, so fresh pasta, it's amazing. Go out onto Danforth, where you'll find a lot of our Greek food. Every summer they host the Taste of the Danforth, and you can go in and sample from all the different restaurants. It's such a great food fair for us. And then also Little India. But for me, if you look right here downtown, we have the Distillery District, which is where they have revamped all of the warehouses. So you'll find private art collections in there. You'll find lots of craft breweries, and so great food. I would highly recommend it. And then if the hot spots from the restaurant perspective, not very far at all from the convention center, Scatterbush and Kelly's Landing, which are just on Front Street, which are just east of us here, so a couple of blocks. Of course, there's the CN Tower and the Ripley's Aquarium, and Tourism Toronto has been great help for us at Sibos.
And 8,000 restaurants?
8,000 restaurants, yes.
Seriously, are we going to get around all of
I don't
these?
know.
We'll try.
Well, you can try, but remember the craft beer is really excellent. And, you know, what I love about the city now is it's really changed. And the vibe of Toronto is so alive. We've brought people back to the city to live, and that really has shaped our community. So lots of nightlife, anything that you might want to be looking for.
Well, Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here again this year. And thank you very
Thank
much
you.
Great to see you
for
again.
highlighting some of the key areas that we should go to in Toronto.
Yeah, I think the
Thank
craft
you.
beer, that's on my list.
That's
is
on your
indeed.
list?
Because you won't get it anywhere else, right? So,
You won't. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And you can catch Lisa tomorrow at 2 p.m. in Conference Room 3 with a session about the role of payment market infrastructures and correspondent banks in instant international payments.
But that's just about all from Nadine and myself for today. Security has been a big topic, and on that note, I need to remind you to bring your official photo ID with you along with your badge before you come. Otherwise, they won't let you in.
So remember that, Stephen. I need you here tomorrow. And if you get time at the end of the day, drop by the Swift Institute, where one of Canada's best-known biographers and historians, Charlotte Gray, is signing copies of her book, The Promise of Canada, 150 Years, People and Ideas That Shaped Our Country. And I'm hoping to catch up with her later as well.
That's right. Well, right now, coming up, if correspondent banking is not the future, what is? A follow-up from one of the most popular Sibos sessions last year. So stay with us at Sibos TV for that.
Please do.
Bye-bye.